And it suggested that because we have this history, going back to slavery, of being seen and used as sex objects, that through our arrival as whole people, when we were always whole people, but as we came to through the years and our understanding of ourselves and how we fit in society, we live among a community of people that just want to be separated from our history, and especially around sexuality, because they saw it as being used, and others named it as dirty and so forth. And so when you see gay and lesbian people, or bisexual people, or transgender people, it reminds them of what we used to be labeled as.
Why? Because they view that community as truly sexual.
Because they right. I always tell people, if I had all the sex you think I'm having, I'd be tired. I might be happy, but I'll be tired.
Okay.
But yes, that's the thing, because what happens is people get focused on sex. My mother, my sister, I'm sure other people, when they find out that I'm a lesbian person, that's what they think about. My mother wants to say that she doesn't want to see or think about how I make love. Like, well, if I was with a man, you wouldn't be seeing that either.
Okay.
And so people get so caught up on sex and don't want to talk about sex that gay and lesbian people are alienated. But the thing that bothers me, and you mentioned this before, is how gay and lesbian and bisexual people can be so ignorant and judgmental when it comes to trans people. And ignorance is really the whole thing, as when you talked about the church in general, when we're talking about I always call it the alphabet, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, questioning, all of it. When we talk about that part of the community, people are just ignorant. As I said, there's a difference between sexual orientation and gender identity, which is why I say I'm not sure that the T fits there, but
but the way I see it fitting as being a part of a general gender non-conforming community.
I like it. I like that.
You know what I'm saying? Where we're all a part of this community that is basically, as regards the greater community at large, gender non-conforming.
I like that. I like that.
So that we all fit in that umbrella.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for helping me with that.
and then, as I said, the T happens to cover a number of sexual orientations.
And see, what we just did is what needs to happen.
Education.
Yes. Yes. I mean, really, we need to have more transgender persons in the church, or having dialogue with people, because, as I said, it's ignorant. It's ignorant, and unfortunately, even in our subculture, we don't learn about each other.
But do you think some of those attitudes in the LGBT community, let's leave off the T for a moment, is it possible, particularly in the African American segment of that community, isn't it possible that they, in an attempt to blend or belong to or feel a part of the greater community, hold on to some of those mores of the community at large and its attitudes toward religion and how they manage to fit and use it when relating to the transgender community?
Well, I have to tell you,
I mean, particularly the strict gender roles that are practiced, in the African American community, as far as a man must remain manly and a woman must remain feminine. And then they say, well, you all aren't doing that, but we're doing this, so we fit better.
Right. Again, it's education. the difference between sexual orientation, and gender identity. I believe if we need to educate gay and lesbian persons about what's the difference here. Which bothers me that particularly black gay and lesbian persons call ourselves same gender loving. That's not correct. It's not same gender loving.
Well, there's some people who really debate you on that. They don't want to be called gay. They're going to be same gender loving.
I know, but really, we're not talking about gender. You know.
Right, and sex loving.
Yeah.
Because the gender identity. I got you.
Yeah, it's not really correct, and that sounds very fundamental, maybe a little bit too simplistic, but I think that's the root of the whole thing. That we don't understand that people who are transgender are people who were created in the image of God as they are. And the problem is, for gay and lesbian and bisexual persons, they're victims of our history. Because we come out of churches and traditions that were very exclusive. So you know how they say, once you're oppressed, you can become a worse oppressor. And it's the same sort of dynamic, because as I talked about how black people historically, the reason that that some of our churches are so against or so anti same gender loving people, gay people, LGBT people, is because of that history of shame. Because they don't want to attach themselves to anything that has to do with sex. So because there's a level of shame that came with that. And I believe the reason why we have that problem with the LGBT community being separated from the T community is also a level of shame and lack of self-acceptance. Because I believe once you really come to love yourself, know yourself, value yourself, we wouldn't have all this separation. But I think that because there were so many people in the LGBT community who still see themselves as flawed and don't value themselves. So when they're accepted by the rest of the community,
they can begin to become more.
Exactly. And so when you look, so when they get to, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but it just seems to make sense that when our community, the LGBT community, particularly among those who have not really reconciled who they are with their sexuality and their spirituality, then, when it comes to transgender people, it's like, okay, now we just got here. now you come, and now you make another conversation start that may get me recognized or excluded as well. We just got here. We just worked ourselves in here. Here come you.
Or you say that you might draw some negative attention to me.
Exactly. Because here come you, and people have to really start to grapple with the question about sexual identity, gender identity, not sexual identity. And it's interesting. I taught a class, and this still is mind-boggling. I taught a class based on that book I told you about, Their Own Receive Them Not, and in one of the class sessions, there was nothing but gay and lesbian persons in the class that day. And I asked them, do you think the church is really ready to be inclusive of transgender persons? And they said no. I'm like, how can you say no? And half of them said, well, we just don't understand them. I'm like, well, who understood you historically?
Right.